Vehicles in self-line. Vehicle gas closeouts have started.
AFTS is ready for launch.
Falcon 9's in startup. Stage 2 tanks pressing for flight.
LD is go for launch. T-minus 30 seconds. 20.
Stage 1 tanks pressing for flight.
15. 10. 9. 8. 7. 6. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Liftoff, Falcon 9.
Vehicles cleared the tower.
Hit on propulsion nominal.
Moving to 3.170.
Power and telemetry are nominal.
T plus a minute 10 into flight. We've just gone through throttle down and throttle back up of the Falcon 9 first stage engines. We've gone through max Q on the first stage. First stage continues to look good on the engines, headed downrange away from Vandenberg Air Force Base. We're chilling in the MVAC engine 2 minutes into flight, getting it ready for ignition. Next major event coming up in 30 seconds is shutdown of the 9 first stage engines, followed by stage separation and ignition of the second stage engine. Shortly after that, we hope to get a view of payload fairing separation from the second stage.
Miko.
Stage separation confirmed.
Reset from startup.
We've had successful separation and ignition of the upper stage engine. First words from propulsion, things look good on the upper stage engine and the second stage.
Boost
Next
vector
up, we
shut
should
down.
see fairing separation.
Fairing separation confirmed.
You hear the applause from the team gathered around Mission Control Center here in Hawthorne. It's 5:30 in the evening. Second shift is in. They're watching the flight. Fairing separation looked very good, exposing the 10 Iridium Next satellites to the vacuum of outer space. We're 3.5 minutes plus into flight. Second stage performance continues to look excellent. T plus 4 minutes into flight. Falcon 9 second stage continues to perform nominally. Power on the engine looks good. Avionics looks good. Guidance looks we're on track, headed south away from California, eventually overflying the South Polar Cap on our way off of Eastern Africa, where we'll eventually deploy later in the webcast the 10 Iridium Next satellites. T plus 5 minutes into flight. You can see the camera views looking back on the nozzle of the MVAC-D Merlin vacuum engine. Red hot, which is just what we expect at this stage of flight. The engine is at full power, continuing to perform normally, as I like to say. And meanwhile, the second stage is on trajectory, headed for its initial low Earth parking orbit. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but for now, everything continues to look good. T plus 6 minutes into flight. Falcon 9, second stage carrying 10 Iridium Next satellites, is currently west and south of the tip of Baja California. I hope that everybody in Southern California had a great view of the launch this evening. We've had clear skies, the rocket launching about half an hour after sunset. Now currently we're in burn 1. This takes us into the low Earth parking orbit. That's a temporary orbit that we'll be in for about half an orbit around the Earth before we relight the upper stage engine, and that will move us with its second burn into the final orbit. We'll be bringing you that second burn later on in the webcast.
Stage 1 entry startup. Stage 1 entry burn. Entry shut down.
Stage 1. AFTS has
7.5 minutes into flight. Falcon 9 second stage continues to perform well. We are continuing on the desired trajectory, headed south from Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, heading into an approximate polar orbit with the Iridium Next satellites. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to have 2 burns. We're in the first burn right now. This is the long burn, just over 6 minutes. We're beginning to throttle down power on the upper stage engine, preparing for shutdown about a minute from now. Meanwhile, we'll then go into a coast period of 42 minutes between the end of the burn that we're on now and then the relight that'll come over the Eastern Hemisphere. So during that coast phase, we're going to pause live commentary. We'll have a map so that you can see our path as we go over the southern polar regions en route to going east of Africa. We've heard the call out. Stage 2 flight termination system has safed in preparation for going into orbit. Once we go into orbit, we'll wait to hear a call from the guidance, nav, and control engineer called GNC on the quality of that orbit. Welcome back to the commentary for today's Falcon 9 flight of the Iridium 4 mission. On the screen you can see the MVAC-D engine chilling in right now, getting ready for ignition coming up in less than a minute from now. Now this is going to be a short relight of the upper stage engine. It's going to last about 4 seconds. That'll be just enough to raise us into a circular 625-kilometer orbit. Now currently we're using cold nitrogen gas out of a couple of settling thrusters at the bottom of the second stage to make sure that we have got the second stage pushed up against the fuel so that we have liquid in the inlets to the turbopumps so that when they start, they immediately start pulling propellant. So we're going to listen in right now for ignition of the upper stage engine. That'll run about 4 seconds. Then hopefully we'll hear the GNC engineer confirm a good orbit.
Spacecraft 1.
Welcome
separation
back.
confirmed.
And we have separation of the first Iridium satellite. You can see it at the bottom left of the screen drifting away. An on-time separation. Now every 100 seconds will begin a sequence where satellite 2, 3, 4, and continuing on will deploy. So 1 down, 9 to go, and we'll be back at time for the next deployment. Into flight, we're getting ready for the second deployment. This one may be visible from the very top of the screen.
Spacecraft 4, separation confirmed.
We have deployment. The second of the 10 Iridium satellites successfully deployed, drifting away from the Falcon 9 second stage. Coming up, we're about 10 seconds to deployment. Now it looks like we may have lost telemetry coverage as we expected for the deployment of the third satellite.
Expected.
We've heard the call out, lost a signal from the Mauritius ground station as expected. So we'll just stay here for a minute while we wait for the Falcon 9 telemetry to be acquired by the next ground station, which I believe is Dubai, and then we'll get indication on whether or not the third satellite has deployed. Satellite, the third one planned to deploy, did go at the correct time. We now have confirmation through telemetry. The next separation coming up right now. A nice view coming off of the side of the payload dispenser that's mounted on top of the Falcon 9 second stage. In the forward-looking view of the payload camera, you can see the fourth satellite drifting away still, that white image just to the left. And we're about ready.
Spacecraft 3, separation confirmed.
And we have confirmed the fifth of the 10 Iridium Next satellites has deployed. However, this one was not in the field of view. View looking forward again. Satellite 6 preparing for deploy. This should be from the bottom of the screen, so you might see a little bit of motion as it moves away.
Spacecraft 6, separation
And there it
confirmed.
goes into the sunlight over the eastern hemisphere as we're passing over the Arabian Peninsula. 6 satellites down, there are 4 still to go in this 15-minute deployment sequence.
Spacecraft 10, separation confirmed.
And a great view from the payload camera watching the 9th of 10 satellites deploy. You can see in the background, as we saw in the last flight, several bright dots. Those are earlier Iridium satellites that were deployed minutes ago, forming that long chain of satellites coming off of the Falcon 9. So we're down to 1 to go. That'll be coming up in just under a minute and a half or so from now at about 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 18 seconds. We'll come back and watch that last one separate and then wrap up the webcast. Right left on the back side of the dispenser, we're waiting for deploy confirmation.
Spacecraft 8, separation confirmed. Final spacecraft deployed.
Outstanding.
That's 40 in orbit in 2018.
We heard the call out, 40 in orbit in 2017. So we're 10 for 10. All 10 Iridium satellites have deployed right on time into the desired orbit. Falcon 9 looked good all the way through that sequence. So that's going to bring an end to our webcast. It says summarize events. It was an outstanding set of events this evening. We were followed along here.